Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Pete Bickford. This is the ComicBase live stream. Welcome. And for the next probably a short-ish amount of time today, we'll be talking about all things disaster related. In particular, we're going to be talking about some of the things you can do to make sure your database does not get screwed up. And then by way of trying to deliver some good news at the end of the thing, we're going to talk about if your database did get screwed up despite all this, some new tools that we've just rolled out in ComicBase, which should actually stand a pretty good chance of getting you out of hot water. So, which on one hand, I'm sitting there kind of pre-planning the show ahead of time thinking, you don't want to bum people out. You don't want to stress people out. Life is stressful enough already today, in this day and age. And so I thought, I don't even want to have this show until I can say that it's going to end with a happy ending because we've just done this new thing that will get you, get you out of trouble. And then it occurs to me as I've just said this now, it's like, wait a minute, if I'm going to say, here's a bunch of things you shouldn't do, and if you do get in trouble, well, here's a thing that makes it all better. I don't know how much you pay attention to that whole thing about don't do the first things. I don't know. Anyway, hi guys. Before we get into things too much, I want to say hi to the folks who are here. Richard Scott, first in line here. Welcome. Mike Beam from out in Vancouver, Washington. Things are cooling off around the country, and it's heading for fall and looking pretty good. Xandu Comics coming in from Seattle. Brian Price from 96 degrees in Dallas, Texas. Ding! Our moderator is back in the house here. Greg Hex is out here from South New Jersey. Oroviejo coming in from Minneapolis. Department of Comics is in the house in Northeast Florida, and we'll probably have other folks popping in as we get going. But anyway, please, if you don't mind, if you have questions you'd like me to answer during the show, please put them to @ComicBase TV in the chat. And also, if you would take a moment, I'd very much appreciate it if you could like and hit subscribe if not already done so. And also, if you could leave a short comment on YouTube, just like, wow, Pete has fantastic hair, whatever the hell the thing is. That's the sort of thing that actually gets them to actually distribute this to other people who like comic books and stuff, and it helps grow the subscriber count. So I appreciate that. So anyway, before we get into the disaster portion of the show, there's been obviously a bunch of new builds in ComicBase. We'll be talking about those toward the end. If you want to ever download the very latest builds of ComicBase, never forget that you can go under Setup and Preferences in ComicBase and say, it'll say, do you want to check for updates every so often? If you check the boxes, say, include interim updates, then you'll see all the things that we've been doing in between the big builds, including the stuff we're about to talk about today. But it's, spoiler alert, it's about to become part of the big quarterly roll-up that we're doing probably in the next week or two. But if you do want to get a jump on things, if you check the interim builds, you'll get it there. Or if you just feel like going about the hard way, if you go under the My Account registration screen at comicbase.com, and just whenever you download the software, you'll always get the very latest version that we've got. If you do that, you'll get everything we're talking about today. Anyway, so and Department of Comics has already busted my balls. All right, cool. So anyway, so the good and the bad. Well, the good news for you guys, y'all, and the bad news for me is that I spent the entire bloody day doing nothing but submitting the Android app to the App Store. Yes, version 3.0 of the ComicBase app is finally going to be out there. It might even be live by the time we speak about this. But if you guys have ever not had the misfortune of becoming app developers in your lives, I guess there's things about being a programmer I absolutely adore. You can just basically come with a wacky idea, you think on it hard enough, you kind of work out all the odds, bits, and angles, the hard programming tricks, whatever the whole thing is. But generally, if you pound on it long enough, you're going to be able to create something fantastic. And that part about programming is awesome. The part about programming for mobile that's, well, I'm going to try to keep it clean here, but which is less than optimal, is that when you want to go through Android or Apple, you have to go through what's called the app stores. Basically, on your devices, nothing, unless you do things like jailbreaking your devices or side loading apps and doing things like that. The people who make your Android and your iPhone very much want you to get all your apps through the official channels, which means a couple things. One is that in theory they've screened it for I don't know, appy goodness on some level. More importantly, that they're going to get 30% of all revenue that comes in from the app. That's I think really where the impetus for the App Store comes from. Because Apple at this point makes more money off the App Store and the selling of iPhones than they ever did selling computers. But even Android, it's a big deal there. Android's process for getting your app released to the App Store is not super involved. I mean, once you've got it up once, it's not the end of the bloody world. You have to obviously put new art in, new bundles, manifests, signing keys, the whole thing. But it's something that, like, okay, if you've gotten through it once, you can get through it another day, unless you've done something like reinstall your operating system on your computer or things like that. At which point you're in certificate hell, and it's just an absolute nightmare. Apple, on the other hand, is a whole other special kind of fun, where it starts with things like, we're just going to periodically verify your corporate identity every random amount of days, and we have brand new Indians tax signing certificates for India, even if you don't charge for your app. I mean, there's like a whole sheaf. It's like doing your taxes before you're even allowed to get to the point where say, hey, look, here's the new build of my app, can we get that through there? And then you go through the app approval process for Apple, and theirs involves all the same stuff that the Android guys do, except that they also have actual human reviewers, and they have automated code things that chew through your app as well. But human reviewers will go through there with a fine-tooth comb looking for any derivations from what they regard as their App Store guidelines. And again, the App Store guidelines are biased strongly towards things like, does the app ever point back to your own site as opposed to Apple's site? So for the longest time, for instance, there would be a problem with the program where if you had an extra database in your program, like you'd once created a new backup or something like that, and you went checked it, well, then that backup would become known to our servers, and it would get listed as a potential choice for one of the databases that you would show in the program, even though you probably didn't want to. And we would say things like, well, it'd be great if we just had a little button here which said, get rid of the database I don't want to see. But that would tie back to our website, and then Apple actually made us take the button out. We've gone and tried again, so hopefully no one from the App Store is listening right now. We've tried it in a different way that hopefully won't trigger their automatic being pain in the butt tools, but we're trying to make the user experience on some of these things better, and it's, you swear to God, it's like, and they'll just bounce your app back to you over a course of weeks again and again and again, and you just have to keep on tweaking and resubmitting and tweaking and resubmitting until eventually one day it's like, oh yeah, it's up in the store now. And it's like, you think there'd be like a chorus of angels and and everything else like that. No, it's just the app, it just goes live. It's really kind of underwhelming when you finally get through it. It's kind of like playing the world's worst choose your own adventure game, where like 4 out of every 5 choices as you go between the pages lead you either to go return to page 27 and try again, or one of those choices, you can do things like, if you become so frustrated trying to find the proper app managed signing key for the latest release of your program because they've mothballed the old one, or you've switched computers or something like that, if you sit there and say, well, heck with it, I'll just make a new signing key, I was like, oh, did you know that this choice, if you just do it, will make it so that no one can ever update your existing app anymore? Any of your current users who have it will never see that you have an update, and your new app will be treated as if it's a brand new thing by another company, and you'll have to tell them manually, hey, make sure to uninstall it off their phone and install the new one. So that's one of the things that could happen had I made different choices today. So yeah, it's like the world's most unfun game ever. It wastes an enormous amount of times, and if you win the game, all that happens is that thing that you thought would happen on page 1, where I say, I would like to publish my app, and you press the button to deploy your app. You're expecting the next thing is, your app is now live in the store. No, you go through the whole novel of really unfun crap before then, before you eventually are like, your app is now deployed in the store. So anyway, this is what I've been up to lately. The good news is it's sometime between 0 and like, I don't know, usually a day or 2 from now, worst case. The Android guy should be able to see version 3.0 of the mobile app. It has all the new wonderful goodness of the whole things. It'll do things like, it'll remember your last used database. It will allow you to get rid of unused databases. It will work properly in dark mode. It, all the things that were kind of annoying with the old one, we tried to solve as many of those as we could. It now lets you browse all the same things Atomic Avenue does, so you can look up magazines and books and things like that that weren't really possible before, and a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, that's coming. The Apple guys, you are my project for tomorrow. Hopefully we can get that submitted through the store soon, which again means that between 0 and a month from now, 0 days and a month from now, that will finally be up there. Importantly for the Apple guys, the new version of the app will work with the iPhone Pros with the weird little extra camera that they have there, which was always the problem with the iPhone Pros, and I actually had to blow what's like $700 to get myself an iPhone Pro, just to test with, is that because of the extra camera they use for macro photography, unless you did some special work to tell it to switch cameras and use that one, when you're looking close, the barcode that you'd be trying to scan with would always be too far away to be recognized, or if you use the camera, the far camera, the regular camera, it would be out of focus at short distances. And so that one we finally worked out. We had to switch to an entirely new barcode library. What? Yeah, again, good times, just good times. Anyway, so coming up, and I'll say more about that later, but hopefully I'll be in a better mood because this is just good time. All right, moving on. Oh, David Strunzi, hey, ComicBase Mobile doesn't show all issues Transformers Image. I don't know. It might be that we do not have all the issues of Transformers from Image, but we'll have a look. Basically anything that ComicBase or Atomic Avenue should be able to should show up in the app. But there's something like 1.25 million comics in ComicBase, and we only have a little bit north of 1,070,000 images. So there are some comic books that we don't have the pictures for yet. But if there's something else going on, we'll try to figure it out. Okay, Dodger's in the distance. Yes, yes, Dodger was going for his early morning walk. He was guest starring downstairs there. All right, so let's talk doom, gloom, and destruction, shall we? All right, so basically, and I want to keep this one like kind of objective and fun and not be too doom mongery. Basically comes down to this. ComicBase keeps its data on your computer. So, I mean, unless you tell us otherwise, when you install ComicBase, the program is installed on your machine. It will talk to our servers if it needs to get updates for the content. But, if our servers are down or you haven't paid your subscription or whatever the thing is, the software keeps running because it's talking to a big database file on your computer. That big database file by default is called comicbasedatabase.cbdb. It exists by default in a folder on your computer. It used to be in your documents folder by default. If you look in your personal documents folder, there'd be a folder in there called Human Computing, and inside there would be a folder called ComicBase Databases. These days, if you install ComicBase brand new, the default location is now on the top of your C drive in a folder called Human Computing. There's the same ComicBase Databases folder. We did all this, by the way. We switched where it goes to get away from OneDrive to end that particular nightmare. But anyway, the important part, though, is it's a big old file on your machine, which means that it's both convenient. You can, you want to drag it to someplace else. You stick it on a zip drive. You can stick it on a Dropbox. You can mail it to yourself. Well, it might be too big to mail to yourself, depending and so forth. But it's just, there's nothing magical about it. It's just a file. I think about like a big Word document or a big Excel spreadsheet or something like that. It's extremely big. If you have the newspapers in there in particular, it's probably going to be a file north of 2.5 gigabytes. By the way, if you'd like to make your database quite a bit smaller, I'm going to do a quick commercial here just now for a feature that's built into the latest version of ComicBase 2025. If you'd like to slim up your database quite a bit, go to the File menu. And let's see. Oh, let me launch the magnifier here so I can make things a little bit easier to see. Okay. If you go to the File menu, go to File Tools, and then go down to Choose Media Types in Database. It's a new feature we just rolled out with ComicBase 2025, but you can just say which media types do you actually collect. It gives the definitions of each one. But in particular, if you don't collect newspapers, if you uncheck it and then hit save, it'll say, hey, do you want me to remove any newspapers that aren't in your, that aren't listed as being in stock? And should you do that, you will be removing about 3.25 million records out of the database, which makes it a lot smaller. So if you're, again, if you're a newspaper guy and you love newspapers, keep them in by all means. If you're not a newspaper guy, you can make your database way smaller. Like you'll lose over 1 gigabyte on the file size if you just get rid of those. And it makes updates faster and things like that. So worth doing if you haven't checked that out lately. But anyway, with this 1 to 2 gigabyte file on your machine, all the normal things that can go wrong on any file on your machine can go wrong with it. The primary ones that can go wrong are you can have a disk error. Your disk can be failing in one way or another. and we'll talk about mechanical versus SSDs in a sec probably. Less so, I'm going to say, with SSDs than with mechanical ones. Mechanical drives, which we're starting to have less and less of in our lives these days, because SSDs, solid state drives, have gotten much more inexpensive. But mechanical drives, you could do everything from if you happen to bump your desk really hard while the disk was spinning, you could get what's called a head crash, where if you think about what's going on is that there's a plate spinning around, and right next to the plate is these calipers. It's called disk head, and as this plate is whirring around behind it at about 7,000 RPMs, rotations per minute, so very, very fast, there's this little caliper it's switching out there, and it's reading stuff right above it. If you give this whole assembly, which it's basically a, I don't know, probably a 5 or 6 ounce metal, steel plate, suspended. There's a bunch of them stacked on top of each other, suspended in between a bunch of little paperclip looking things. But if you give your desk enough of a jolt during this whole thing, as that thing's spinning, this thing right here will bounce into the head first, a little fraction of a second because of the shock of whatever you did. So if you drop your hard disk on the floor while it's running, for instance, that's called a head crash, because what it actually does at 7,000 rotations a minute is it scratches the magnetic particles right off the head of your disk. At which point, whatever was encoded at that point of your disk is probably gone. That's one way to very quickly do yourself in. SSDs don't have that problem because they're not mechanical, they don't spin. But SSDs have a different problem, where if you've been using them for years and years and years and years and writing just tons and tons of stuff to them, and getting the disk especially very, very full, so you're writing the same places again and again and again. In theory, and I haven't had happen to me personally, but you can get to the point where the drive just doesn't want to write anymore. And smart ones will say, look, I've hit the point where I don't want to write anymore. I'm just going to lock the whole thing, go recover your data. Other ones will it'll just become unreliable. And so you'll just kind of lose the whole drive at once, should that happen. Now, that being said, SSDs are new enough in the market, and the technology's gotten better fast enough in terms of what's called wear leveling, of writing, where what parts of the memory part cells get used. That I don't personally know anyone who's had this happen to them. It is a theoretical problem. So I mean, if you're thinking I'm going to buy one SSD and I'm going to use it till the end of my life, probably not. You're probably going to want to have upgraded at some point in the future before then, especially if you're the kind of person who tends to get your disks very, very, very full. But with that said, yeah, bad things can happen to SSDs too. It can happen. More commonly, the way that people will damage their stuff, other than just mechanically destroying it as it's written to their disk, is they'll do kind of like the big bad of computers, which is while it's writing part of the file, you'll interrupt the power. However you do it, you'll hit reset, because something's taking too long, and you think, heck with it, and you'll force quit, the whole thing, just essentially give it a heart attack. I've had people who lost power dramatically in the middle of, say, writing. It's like, yeah, so now we're updating your database. We're going to write a whole ton of stuff to the disk, and we're right in the middle of it, and at that point, you've got a half-written file, and at least some part of that file is probably not in a good place anymore. Now, there are different things we do, in the database and so forth, that try to insulate you from the effect of some of these things. There's write caches, there's all sorts of commits and things like that. But if you are in the habit of, whenever your computer seems slow, of yanking the power on it, that's probably bad. It's probably going to do you in at some point, and you'll be left with a file that just can't be read. That's probably the most common way to get into really bad trouble, short of disk errors developing. Other than like solid disk crashes and things like that, you can get problems because disks are very, very high density at this point. It doesn't take much of a defect in any part of the whole magnetic coating or the memory cells or anything else like that. The chances of a very small physical defect or memory defect causing some kind of problem on in your life, it is not insubstantial, especially if you go long enough. I mean, over time, every disk will fail. I mean, there is no disk that's ever been made that will last 100 years. It's always a matter of when your disk will fail, not if it will fail. That being said, if you don't do crazy things with your things, you're probably good for years on end, but it's never a zero chance. Finally, I'm going to say there is one other thing that will potentially do you in if you're going to lose data on your computer, and that is viruses. Now, viruses tend to be one of those things that is everyone fears them a lot, and they're almost never the cause of what did you in. It's I would have to say in my own experience that most people who have really bad problems with their computer performance or losing data or things like that, it's more likely that your antivirus software itself is causing your trouble than any kind of actual virus. That being said, if you are the kind of person who clicks on every attachment that, Gunther in Saudi Arabia sent you that told you about, just click here to fill out the form and you'll get Bill Gates's millions or whatever the heck the scam is. If you're the kind of person who clicks on all those things, or if you download pirate copies of everything under the sun, yeah, at some point someone will hit you with some kind of virus, or the malware is the generic term because of things that do bad things. And in particular, the one you want to watch out for is called a worm. Which is basically it's software that's designed to go for a while and then, just like a worm in an apple, start doing you in by getting rid of certain parts of your data. The worst of these are things called ransomware. You probably heard about these ones, where they will actually use encryption techniques. So the same thing you would do to keep someone from stealing your data, they will essentially go and encrypt your data using a password you don't know. And it's very securely locked away and encoded and written very nicely in a format so you'll never be able to read it again. And this is a very common attack for people where they'll say things like, "Oh yeah, you may notice that the only thing." They actually have nice interfaces for ransomware like this now, where like once they've encrypted your disk, it will launch a little bootloader with a little icon saying, you've been screwed. And here's a little symbol here for you. And you'll want to go pay me X amount of Bitcoin. And there's a timer that goes off. It says, yeah, the price is this amount of Bitcoin if you pay me right now, but in 11, 10, 9, 8 hours, the price will double and so forth. And at that point, we'll just encrypt it a second time, and you'll never get it back, and the game is over. This can actually happen. It especially can happen if you're the kind of person who is at a company where you were seen as having money. So hospitals, energy companies, any number of people have been hit with ransomware over recent years. You as just Joe Normal guy, probably not a prime target for this sort of thing, but given all the number of bad actors in the universe and everything, again, try not to be the kind of guy who clicks on everything that you don't know from somebody you're not sure who it is, because you could be installing something like this. The defenses on that one, the number one defense is don't be that kind of guy. Real companies have to worry about things like, bad actors actually hauling USB drives into their organization, which then install the software, by a trusted employer and a trusted account, or for that matter, the security guard at night could have uploaded the whole thing. Especially, or if they know that there's known penetrations in their networks and so forth, it can get around that way and so forth. But for us normal folks, the normal vector for the sort of thing is, you downloaded that free file that someone said, well, this is really hot, or this is really cool, or whatever else. And as part of the very first thing it does is it installs the worm or the ransomware, and then it does the end at that point. If you get tagged with something like this, you kind of have two choices. One is pay up. I don't recommend it. The second alternative is the answer to, and now this is the segue to all the things that go wrong, is backups. All right, so look, you want to not have the problem in the first place, but we talked about the mechanical things in your life are going to fail someday. They will develop defects, whether they're in memory or whether they're mechanical. You will at some point you'll chase the dog, and the dog will bounce into the table at exactly the wrong moment as it takes out your disk. Whatever the thing is, the power will fail at exactly the wrong time. Whatever the thing is. So yes, I mean, harden up the mechanical things in your life as much as you can. Get yourself what's called a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. Solid investment. For $100 you can buy essentially what it comes down to basically is a gussied up car battery. Just imagine a little black box with a bunch of power outlets on the back of it. What's in the black box is a big lead acid battery, which is continually charging up from your house mains power, and what comes out the back of it is battery operated power for all your devices. So what happens then is you plug these things in, the battery keeps charged the whole time, and should the power ever go out on the main power in your house, so there's a thunderstrike or whatever happens, the things that are attached to the outlets on the uninterruptible power supply. Sorry, I bopped my own microphone here. Those things will keep running for a certain period of time. Now, how long they run tends to be measured in a few minutes. If you get really big ones and you don't have a lot of load on them, maybe you'll go 15, 20 minutes, but they won't be running for hours, just to calibrate your expectations on them. What they're meant to do is they're meant to paper over the kind of brief interruptions to power. Like sometimes you get the part where your lights dim and then after a minute they snap back on. They're meant to paper over that sort of thing so that your computer never crashes, never goes down, nothing ever stops that way. And for anything longer than that, it gives you time to shut it down in a controlled manner. Now, we here at the office, my own home, etc., all of our gear is all attached to UPSs. And because UPS is like any other battery, they are all going to go, the battery becomes less effective over time. So we do tests every 6 months, 9 months or so. And we basically simulate for, different parts of the time a power outage. And then we say, okay, is anything not, staying, in the state that we expect? And if so, then those UPSs get swapped out, or we swap the batteries or whatever else. So UPSs also do not last forever. If you do get one, I think they're a highly, highly worthwhile investment. They will keep your computer isolated from a lot of things, everything from power surges and lightning strikes and all sorts of power company foo, especially if you have like lots of weird weather in your area. I definitely would suggest anything important, put it behind a UPS. But that being said, remember, you're also going to have to replace the UPS itself after a while. But hey, for $100 every 2-3 years, not a bad deal in my estimation. Anyway, with that said, you want to avoid the problem to start with if you can. Don't click on the weird things like that. Do install some kind of antivirus software. I'm going to say this, by the way. Windows, don't forget, has very good antivirus software built right in. You don't need to install anything from a third party on this one. Microsoft Defender regularly wins the virus shootouts when they actually say, yeah, we loaded up a disk with 80 different viruses that we knew about, and we saw which virus packages will detect them. Microsoft Defender regularly wins these ones, and most importantly, it does so for free and also without exerting so much draw on your computer's ability that it's as bad as having a virus itself. I mean, I cannot say the same about a lot of antivirus packages, but do make sure you're running something. However you get it. But remember, there is one built into Windows you get. But more importantly, just don't be the kind of guy who is credulous, who just says, hey, obviously, my Uncle Smirnov just sent me an attachment. I have no idea what it is, but he says it's really great and I should click it. Do not click it. Anyway, with that said, when things go wrong, your very first line of defense on all these things is backups. So let's talk about backups. The idea with backups is whatever you have that you can't afford to be without, make sure you have at least 2 of them. So we do this in ComicBase a couple different ways. Every time you launch ComicBase, by default, every time you exit the program, it's going to save 5 time-stamped backups of your database. The idea is that just by default, and I'll show just to make it so you're not looking at me the whole time. Let's just look at where this is controlled. So in ComicBase, and let's look at this under setup. Let's go to preferences. So by default, when you exit the program, it's going to automatically back up your database. It's going to save 5 backups. If you are using a modern computer, it's going to default to compressing these backups to save space. That makes it so instead of taking, between 2.5 and 1.5 gigabytes of space, they'll take, a few hundred megabytes, which is a good thing. And then even better yet, in the ComicBase 2025, you can have it so it automatically saves those backups to the cloud. So here you've got not just a backup on your own machine, but when you exit, it'll also save a backup of your latest thing to our machine. So if the tornado comes out and takes out your house, if your wife, runs over your computer, we've heard them all. But it's always good to have a copy of your most important stuff someplace which isn't on your machine. So when you back up, you have a couple of choices. Do you want to save the backups to the same place as your original database? That's the default. But if you have a secondary disk and your disk is pretty fast, not a bad idea to save your backups to a different disk, because then again, you're spreading out the risk. You have the idea of saying, if I've got a big backup disk, if my C drive fails, well, then maybe my D drive where I store my backups, maybe that one's okay. So have some options here. And again, make sure one of your options is to back things up someplace which isn't your computer. Now, I'm going to say we do this automatically in ComicBase. You should be doing this automatically with everything in your life that you can't afford to be without. Make sure you're backing up. It's a really good idea to have things like Dropbox or Google Drive or one of those things where you make sure your most important critical documents are stored, again, someplace which isn't your computer. And also it's important that this happens sometime when you don't need to think about it, because if your backup strategy relies on you thinking about it, I'm telling you now, I've never met the person who is so disciplined that they can keep that going by just their force of will for any length of time. You got to make it so that the backup happens when you're not at your best, when you are stressed out, when you've been working on the same project for a million years, when you've barely slept. You've got to make sure that your backup strategy is still working. And ideally, not only have it be automatic, but have it go to multiple places. So, for instance, in our operation here, we have the idea of we have quick backups that happen on the local machine. We have backups that happen nightly of all the contents of that machine, both to a secondary backup drive on the local area, which is very fast. And things also get backed up to a NAS, which is a network attached storage. It's a big disk drive essentially on our network. And then after that, we also have, of our most critical data, stuff that's backed up to a completely different service, someplace that's well off-site. So again, you could burn the place down, and we'd still be able to keep operations going. And again, this requires some thought, but it's worth doing. It's just probably the most precious thing in your life, other than like your children and your wife and your loved ones and such, is going to be the data that you've created out of things. It's the amount of time you spend, doing things like, just everything from your personal banking to, any manuscripts you've been working on, your artwork, your photo collection, all those things like that. There is simply no replacing some of these bits, and not all of it's going to live in Google Cloud or someplace else like that. So anything that's like, in your own, sphere of control, make sure you've got it in more than one place. All right, so let me see here. Let me also, switching back to Cam 1. Sorry, I gotta switch my thing here. I've been talking for a while, so let me check. There's a lot of things going on. Chat, please. Okay, so Department of Comics says, can we make backups on multiple drives? You can make your backups in ComicBase. They're going to default to either one place or the other. There isn't like a list of places it's going to copy to in ComicBase. We got to make it, again, so that the whole scheme isn't so involved that no one can manage it, including us. But that being said, I definitely suggest that you do click, for a number of good reasons, click the option to automatically save to the cloud as you go. That way it's stored not only so if let's assume that you've got a main drive with ComicBase on it. If you're backing it up and you're saving your backups to a second drive, that's a whole second thing that's free of a single point of failure, and you'll have a bunch of those, and then you'll have a third one automatically, which is just on our servers. So no matter what happens to your computer, you're going to be okay at that point. So that's I think probably going to be sufficient, unless you're even more paranoid than we are. So it goes. All right, so let's see here. Let's see, and Steve's handled that one again. Cloud copy, okay. All right, Ed, welcome to the chat. And Steve says, not a big cloud fan, would like to have multiple backups on multiple drives. Yeah, no, that's a good thing too. Just, I like multiple backups, multiple drives. What I would probably do if you want to do something like that is run it in combination with secondary backup software. For instance, on my local machine, I use a program called Acronis True Image, which takes care of backing up whole drives or whole partitions or whole, my whole computing thing to another, set of drives, entirely. We do it both to a local drive and also to a network drive. That's not managed within ComicBase. That's handled as a global thing in our business, because believe it or not everything I do is in ComicBase. I do other things. But that's a really good use for something like Acronis True Image is one program that we use for that sort of thing. But I'd say no matter what you're doing, though, is ideally for anything that's really, really critical for you, make sure your stuff is backed up someplace where, if your house goes up in flames, that you're not out in the cold. And so, yeah, it doesn't need to be your first choice of things, but having a cloud backup, like I said, the one built into ComicBase, not a bad idea. By the way, there's a couple additional bonus things about why the one that's built into the automatic save to cloud is a good thing. Number one, free, because a lot of places after your first couple terabytes, they're going, or first couple of gigabytes or whatever, they're going to start charging you money. You've got 2 gigabytes of storage space earmarked with your name on it just by virtue of having bought ComicBase. Which again, if you don't re-up and it's 5 years later, well, then that won't be there anymore. But as long as you're a current customer of ours, then yeah, that's, you don't need to pay anything extra. You've already paid for it with ComicBase, so you may as well use it. The other thing that's nice about it is, with the idea of automatically saving your most recent stuff to the cloud, which again we'll do in the background automatically without you having to think about it. It does a couple of nice things for you just as a ComicBase user. One is it will automatically make it so that within half an hour or so of that happening, your mobile data will all be updated. So when you're looking at your collection on the cloud, again, we don't know what you've got until you tell our servers. Well, you can tell our servers when you save to the cloud, because then when you save it to the cloud, it tells our servers, hey, and also crawl through my data and make sure we update my list of what I've got. And then when you check on the mobile app and you say, hey, I just picked a new issue of Witchblade, where is it? It'll show up right away. And then secondarily, when you move to a new machine, so let's say you buy yourself a flashy new 15th generation Intel machine in 6 months, when you go and do that, if you've been updating to the cloud this entire time, just all you got to do when you install on the new machine to move your database over is just install ComicBase. Just go to your ComicBase account, download ComicBase, install it, and the very first time you launch it, it'll say, hey, well, I don't have a database to work with yet, but I see you've got a cloud backup. You want to use that one? If so, it'll just pull that down and you'll be up and running in no time flat. You won't need to transfer any files around, won't need to do anything at all. So that's kind of a cool thing. I'm not saying it needs to be your only way of going about this sort of thing, but it's definitely handy to have in the mix. Let's see. Department Comics wants to point out, if you're on a Mac, use Apple's Time Machine function. Absolutely good idea. Yeah, Apple has about the best built-in backup of any of the platforms. The Microsoft ones come a long ways from where it was, but still, for Microsoft, I would say third-party apps like True Image, I still would give them the nod on something like this. But Apple's built-in Time Machine is just slick. It just works. So I'm definitely going to, and also nice interface to it. I'm definitely going to give them props on that one. All right, let's see. It asks, is it possible to add a value column in ComicBase? I ask because the collection report contains a price and a value in the report. Yes, the value column is it's what, when you look at, I'll go over to the demo machine and I will show. So there's actually, depending on which version of ComicBase you've got, there's more than one value. So what they're showing, and I might be dancing around your particular issue on this one. So when you're looking at the issues in ComicBase, this is the problem with scrolling. When you look over to, let me go ahead and find here. Price code, value price, where am I looking at here? Cover price, currency. Oh, that's interesting. Does it not show by default? All right, so let me go ahead and show it by default then. So if you go and say columns to view, and if I go down to, there we are, value year 1, 2, 3, 4. If you do that, these will always be the last 4 years of values. And let's go ahead and click on that one here. So all right, so let me go ahead and take value year, I'll take value year 4 and move it up here some, just so it's a little easier to get to. Okay, so when you do that, and so this is the 2024 near mint value of this particular comic book. And if you've got the pro or better versions of ComicBase, you can also get the 2023, 2022, and 2021 values. If you got the Express or the free, it's only going to list the most recent value. But this is the near mint value of that book. Now, it's the near mint value. It's not the value of your comic in your condition. So that's computed based on the grading percentages. So there isn't like a computed value column out there. So if let's say you've got it in very fine condition, it would be worth about 2/3 of whatever the number is. If you don't want to do that math in your head, that does show up on reports. There's not a specific column for it because it's, like I say, it's a computed value. It's a combination of the condition multiplied by this number is what gives that value for you. But that's how you'd show the value throughout the years of things on the main grid. It's interesting. I guess I'd forgotten, or that in the standard views, it's not one of the basic fields. By the way, if I want to show what the heck I was just doing there for anyone who's watching this later on, if you go under Setup and you go to Columns to View, there's a bunch of fields in ComicBase. I mean, there's ridiculous amounts of information that we track for all the different collectibles, and they're different for different collectibles. But there's a standard set of views settings, which is it's the ones that we consider the most useful to have around for everybody. It's the title of the issue, condition, quantity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we won't include the last date of quantity change, the diamond order code, the street date, things like that. Or for that matter, the historical values 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want that sort of information in your life, no problem. It's your program, so go ahead and customize as you like. Just go under Setup, go to Columns to View, check the fields you want to see, and then you can actually drag them up and down to rearrange which order they'll appear in the grid, and that way you can set up exactly the views that you like. There's some presets built in. There's the standard, there's the stand-in with the custom fields, and there's one called data entry, which tends to be if you're just pounding in all the things that would typically come up as you're entering comic books. Just like, say I want to just record everything about comic books as I'm going. These are just presets. But as soon as you've chosen any one of them, just feel free to customize it to your heart's content and put in the fields that are important to you. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful and got to your question. All right, let me go back to the main camera over here. Let's see. Paradog can be your friend. Definitely a believer. Let's see here. I think, did we get most of it? Oh, nope, there's more. Let's see. Student value forward. Yeah, so the value forward doesn't match the value in the collection report. The collection report, if it'll match it exactly if we're talking about near mints. If we're talking about anything other than near mint, the way you get to the value is by multiplying its guide value in near mint by the grading percentage that whatever grade you've got would tend to be in I'm sorry. So if you look at, let's say I had it in fine, for instance, if you come up here under Setup and we look at the grading, all right, so for instance, fine comes in at 33% of near mint value. So let's say you had a book that was $10 in near mint, it'd be worth about $3.50, $3.30 in fine condition, and so forth. Like I say, there isn't a computed value field that shows by default, mostly because the default price you're going to have is going to be by default, when you put a new book in, and I say I've got it, that same $10 book, and I say I've got it near mint, the default price the ComicBase is going to suggest for it is going to be very close to, it's going to be the next sensible number to 33% of $10. Now, the sensible number comes down to is like, what would a sane comic store price this at? Which is to say, it's a rounded figure, which rounds to the next sensible number. So if you're talking about a $10 item, it's going to round it to $3.50. It's not going to make it $3.33 and so forth, because no sane comic store would ever price a comic book like that. Its actual value will be $3.33 because that's exactly what 33% of 10 is, but the price it suggests will be $3.50 because $30.33 is a weird price to stick on something. And it's a sliding scale. I mean, as the value goes up, if you're talking about $1,000 item, it's going to round it to about $350. It won't go to $330 and so forth. And it goes up and down from there. But for you who are wondering what's the difference between price, value, and so forth, that's kind of where we get into that sort of thing. Like I said, we don't have a visible computed value field on its own, mostly because the price, if you don't change it, is going to be pretty much that anyway. But if that's something that you guys feel like you want to see, let us know. I'd be interested. Let's see here. Steve says, back up to the thumb drive, an external SSD, and NAS, 2 disks, a desktop, and offside my grandfather's daughter's desktop might be overdone, but I have a crash years ago, wiped everything else. Yeah, that's, again, I'm never going to tell anyone you're crazy if by over backing up. And we have, for our stuff, we have at least 4 levels of backup. Yeah, I mean, because you always want to trade the convenience of being able to get it back right away. In other words, you back up to something we can get very fast to something that you can get it no matter what. And so that's why we always have the doctrine around here that all local backups are always backed up to something central in the same location, and then everything that's critical is always backed up to a second location that's offsite, just because you need to be able to do that stuff. All right, let's see here. We're hitting the PSAs already, so the PSAs, let's just get through them. Don't forget, please hit like and subscribe if you like this sort of thing, because it's the sort of thing we do. Don't forget, we have ComicBase message boards at forums.comicbase.com, including one for suggesting new topics for the live stream. And also, don't forget about Andre's amazing ComicBase cover catalog, which I believe he has a new edition of, which is, again, just imagine 1 million plus covers of comic books just laid out in print format. It's astonishing. And, oh, wait. Arg, mateys, don't forget to hoist your mizzen mast, swap your poop deck, and have a bit of fun tomorrow. September 19th is the International Talk Like a Pirate Day. And by the way, I believe it's also Batman Day this weekend as well. So I guess Pirate Batman coming up? I don't know. But anyway, but enjoy it whatever you want. All right, so I think we got that business out of the way. So, all right, hopefully we've gotten the religion on backups and antivirus and the whole thing. Now let's get to the happy part. So let's say you've done all that, and something went wrong, and still you're messed up. You wake up one day, and ComicBase is giving you a message that says malformed disk image, which is a strange error. I will absolutely admit that. Matter of fact, you probably won't see it listed exactly like that, because we actually... that's the message that the database engine itself is giving us. When we try to do something with your database, and the underlying database engine says, yeah, this guy's database is not in good shape. Again, typically because either your disk is failing, or you've managed to clobber it right when it was in the middle of doing a big write. Lesser, but a possible chance you've got a virus or a worm. But honestly, probably 95% of it is either you've got a bad disk, or you clobbered your machine right in the middle of it doing a write. Just being honest about the causes of these things, that's typically what will do this. But if we ever detect, and we're in the middle of doing anything, we have a global error message handler. It intercepts most error messages, so we can have a first look at them and try to be more productive with them as we can. Anyway, if you've downloaded the very latest ComicBase, which I believe is build 1400 and something or other, let me have a look at it over here, and I'll tell you exactly. So the very latest ComicBase is 25.0.0.1464. So if you've got build 1464, or for that matter, probably 1428 or better, there are suddenly some new ways you can have of dealing with bad things that have happened to your machine somehow. And the cool thing is, we've found out some of these things by having people who've had damage in their databases that they've kind of been chasing around and ignoring for years on end, so that they've blown past all their backups. They've overwritten them because they've kind of ignored the problem when it was a problem to start with, and they used up all their local backups, and then it managed to back up their bad database on top of their good database, and then years and so forth. So these are people who are like, over time, just because it didn't get dealt with, the problem got worse, and it took out the easy thing. The easy thing you would definitely say is, if you got a backup, go to the backup. But if you don't have a backup, there are now some nice ways that we've got of getting you out of trouble most of the time. Now, granted, if your machine just failed in a bizarre way, it had disk images, errors or whatever else. If you actually just ripped apart the ComicBase database, much of what's in there is stuff that we already know it, or we can reconstruct it, or we can do without it, and so forth. I mean, the part that's really critical is the information about what you've got in your collection, and that tends to be centralized in a couple of tables. They're not even the biggest tables in the database, and so a lot of the ancillary information, the information about creators and things like that, that's stuff that we can reconstruct, because we've got clean copies of that all day long. But the stuff that's unique to you, we can never get back, right? Well, it turns out most of the time when you have errors that don't stop you cold. I mean, if it stops you cold instantly, like you launch the program and it says your program is damaged, well, at that point, then something that was very key is damaged, and yes, you'll want to go to your backup. But let's say you've got damage in your database, but it only shows up at certain times, like when you're downloading updates, or when you're rebuilding creator lists, or doing things like that. Well, then you still got a problem. It's still going to vex you, but we can probably set it right, because what we can do is we now can take the information that's critical to you, the stuff that's unique about your collection, and we can automatically pull that into a new clean copy of the database, pull over all your data, and kind of restore the whole thing to health. We used to do this when we need to, through a long series of steps that involved making a new database, downloading the latest updates to it, saving a copy of it, going back to your original database, exporting your books, your comics, or whatever else, importing things in, lining up the fields exactly right, and then reconstructing the whole thing again. There was a way to do it beforehand. It's just that would almost always involve getting someone from human computing on the line to help you out with it. It was never any fun. But now there's a much better way. And so let me show you what that is. So now, if you go in with the various latest versions of ComicBase, go to the File menu, go to File Tools. There's a new option down here, right next to the one where I said choose your media types or database, called Recover Database. And what this does is it's a one button make it better on your whole database. So if you click this one, basically it says, yeah, look, this is going to try to repair a database whose structure has been damaged, and tells you what I just said about this, how you get it to be damaged, and do you want to go and do it? Now, I'm not going to do it to this one, because the very first thing that this will do is check over your database and say, well, is it really damaged? And it's going to find out this database is not really damaged, and it'll say, yeah, I'm done. But let's assume your database really is damaged. What'll happen now is it'll say, okay. And then behind the scenes, and at this point, you can just go grab yourself a cup of coffee, because it takes 5-10 minutes, on most people's computers. And if you have a very slow computer, maybe a little longer, but on a modern computer with a modern SSD, something like 5-10 minutes is about that's probably going to take you. But what it's going to do, it's a bummer. I lost my cool framing in of myself here, so oh well, I'll fix that later on. Anyway, but what it'll do is, behind the scenes, is it will take your data, it will make a fresh copy of a blank ComicBase database. So like a one that it's like if you were creating a brand new ComicBase database, like when you said new ComicBase data, it goes and creates a new ComicBase database. It then takes your database and says, what data types are you actually collecting? So it's not going to copy newspapers if you don't collect newspapers. It's not going to copy books if you don't collect books, and so forth. But it's going to go then blow away all the items of that type that are in the stock database, because yours could be completely different than ours, right? So let's say you collect books, comics, and magazines. That's pretty typical, right? You'll see that it will say, okay, I've made a new database. I'm going to actually blow away the books that were in the other one, and now I'm going to copy over the books from your damaged database into into this new clean copy. So I'm going to do the same thing with your comics. I'm going to do the same thing with your magazines. And then if it gets done with that, at that point you're pretty much out of hot water. It's going to go and it's going to run some cleanup tasks to reconcile all the IDs and do some integrity checking on the new thing to make sure it's all tied together in a way that's going to be nice to work with. And then at that point it's going to say, okay, look, you're out of hot water. I fixed it all up. Now, can I go ahead and update the lists of all your items and the creators and things like that? Because what you had is likely quite different than what we had, and we'll want to be able to update all those search indexes and so forth, so that when you say, I want to find all the work from John Buscema, we get the real list and not like the list that was in the old database. That part, it actually takes another 5, maybe 6 minutes or so, again, depending on the size of your machine. And then you're done. It's as easy as that. And as a matter of fact, we actually have it tied in because most of the error messages in ComicBase are centralized through a certain point. If one of the error messages is a giveaway that says that your database is damaged in some way, we'll actually tell you right from, you could have been doing something completely different. You could have been downloading an update or something like that. If we detect that there's damage in your database, we'll actually tell you right then, hey, it looks like your database is damaged. Do you want us to try to automatically rebuild it? And if so, all you gotta do is hit one button and it'll go ahead, copy over that new database, move the whole thing over. If it all worked out properly and you've got the new one, it then renames your old database as, old database parenthesis damaged. And the new database will be called whatever your old new database was, your old database was called before. This way, you don't need to worry about updating your sidekick to point to new things. You don't need to do anything else. It's really just a one-button fix. It will leave around a secondary copy of your untouched damaged database, just in case something went wrong and we didn't get it all. So we're always making copies. We're not changing anything about your damaged database at that point. Yeah, no, it's like a one-button make it better. So it's pretty cool. We've tried it on every database that we had that was damaged, that we could look at all, and it works pretty damn slick, I'm going to say. It's one of those things where I actually gave myself Friday off last week, because the way we tried it we'd allocate a certain amount of time to get through all of our test cases and everything on the whole thing, and we got through it like a day and a half early. And so it's like, you know what, I'm actually going to go and not work for a day for once. Yeah, no, we'll think we'll dig it. We think you'll dig it. Another thing that we do in correspondence with this one is, well, let me show you two things. First of all, we've also added some new options to the optimized database command over here. Now, you guys probably know optimized database is the command that as you're using the database file, if you've been looking at its file size, it tends to get larger over time. It's due to the way the databases stack data at the end and so forth. What Optimize essentially does is it goes through and writes a nice clean copy of your database out with no extra foo in it, and so it winds up being smaller. The data, the indexes wind up all being optimized and so forth, and that's all great. And incidentally, in the doing of that, it will also tell you if there's certain kinds of disk errors and so forth, but it won't always. Because it's not checking exactly for that. It's just doing a bunch of work. Now, there's some new options here. When you go to optimize your database, should you want to do this, you can do the usual thing, which is optimizing only, which is, the whole shrink it down the size of the database, make sure your indexes are as fast as they can be, and the whole thing's as compact as it can be. You can also have it do a quick integrity check of the database before optimizing. In my testing of things, this has always caught the damage that was in damaged databases that I had to work with. So this one has always been enough, and it only takes part of a minute generally to say whether or not there was any kind of damage in the database. But you also, if you want, can also do a full integrity check as you go. It takes quite a bit longer to do. And it does things like making sure all your, the keys in the database are set up properly and so forth. This has not been something that I've been able to find a database that it would find a problem here, but it wouldn't have found the same problem here. But by all means, feel free to try them out and see how see what you think. These do take a few extra minutes to do the job, which is why the default when you optimize is always going to be this one right here. And also because whenever we're just using the database, if we happen to see damage right then and there, we're always going to say, hey, do you want to fix it? And then we'll take you right here, which is, do you want to make it all better? But those are all features now built into ComicBase. And for anyone who's been like kind of nursing along a damaged database for some time, however it got there, this should put you in the right. With that said, I do want to put out a call of if you've got a damaged database out there, could you send it to us? Because we're very much interested in making these tools as robust as we can. And so especially if you've got something that we're not able to immediately repair, I would like to know about it, because then we can have a shot at making these tools a little bit even better. But if you do have a database that is having trouble, please send to us. Send us either a Dropbox link, or if you can get it to upload using Sidekick, tell us what the name of it is, and point out to pbickford@human-computing.com. There's my info up there. Please, send me a note. I would love to have a look at it. And as far as do that, ideally before you go ahead and just use the Make It Better button and then make it all better, because then I won't know what it was that was better. Actually, I guess you could send me the parenthesis damaged copy afterwards, and I'll know what it was that the thing just made better. But I probably won't learn anything new. I guess what I'm really interested in is if you have a database that's damaged in a way that we can't fix automatically, I'd like to see it. But anyway, we're definitely interested in making this thing as hard to kill as possible. So let's see what we can do. All right, one last thing I'm going to put out there. This just came up, and I'm not sure it's even launched in here. You guys might know about a thing called the ComicBase Database Manager. This typically gets used if you've kind of forgotten where your database was. Let's see, you moved your things around on your disks, you've renamed something, and when it goes to launch your ComicBase, you're not using the database you expect it to be. This is a utility that's built into ComicBase, which will automatically scan your hard drive and look for things that look like ComicBase databases and then tell you what's in them. So it's this program over here. And what's going to do is it's going to scan the databases and to say, all right, what do you got? Well, there's a new option in this one, where if you click this button right over here, and it's a little bit slow because it's really busy doing stuff, but if you click to say verify the databases, it'll not only tell you what's in each database as it goes, but it'll also make sure that the database has good integrity. So in other words, it's going to do a verify on the structure of the things as it goes. So if you want to check your whole hard drive and make sure there's no problem with any of your databases you're going, just go ahead and click verify databases, and it'll automatically find out whether there's any trouble and make sure that you're in good shape. But if you happen to do this one and you happen to find any damaged databases, you'll see that they're in red. It'll show them as damaged. At which point, please go ahead and if you could stick those in some kind of shareable format and send them to us, I would very much appreciate seeing those. But that's another feature that's built into the new ComicBase to make sure that, again, we try to make it so you can't get in any trouble. But now, if you did get in trouble, we try to make it so you can get out as easily as possible. All right. Questions came up about custom fields. Yes, this will grab all your custom fields. It won't necessarily, it's using your same preferences as before. So the names of your custom fields are actually in your preferences, but all the data from all your fields, custom fields, notes, everything, it's going to grab it all. And so you should get back 100% copy of what you had before. So let me see what else here. Yes, it will also include issues. If you had issues that weren't in the master database, it's going to copy those over too. So whatever you had, it should get it back for you exactly the way it was. Let's see. Department of Commerce says, I've had corrupted databases. Is that the same thing? Yeah, and if it says that your database is damaged, or you get an issue that says something like a malformed disk image, that would be a corrupted database. What that basically means is the structure of the database on disk is damaged in some way. So like I say, if you still have that, give it a shot with the automatic recovery tools, see if it doesn't make it all better for you. But, send me the damaged copy beforehand, because again, we're kind of compiling, when we do customer support for people, we kind of compile a list of databases that have ever had trouble that we've had to get involved with and try to help people out with. And this has been a better tool for us than all the tools we had to work with beforehand. And the nice thing is you can run it yourself, and it takes 5-10 minutes, and you're just back on the road. You don't need to keep going. This is like the fix a flat for databases. Should it come down to that one, and it should get you going. All right. I think that is about it for now. All right, guys. I hope this was helpful. And if so, then please download the new version, give it a shot. And if you guys need anything else, or if you have any comments or feedback, please let us know. Do look forward to the new ComicBase mobile app that's coming out soon. The Android one will be coming out sooner than the Apple one, I'm virtually certain. But the Apple one should be there as soon as we can get through the dang App Store. So that's about it, and I will see you all on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.